So like I said, back in December, we launched Aethel Sky Effects, which introduces sky segmentation on the web, no app required. This was a pretty big product feature launch of ours, where we introduced the capability for your phone to segment out the sky pixels and to do all sorts of cool things with it. So I'm going to share a few features of this product case, and also some ways that people have used it already. The most obvious thing is to just swap out the sky with an image or a video. In this example, we swap it out with this space-like texture. You can imagine you could use this to replace the sky to change the weather, make it cloudy, make it rainy. I know we've been having some very cloudy weather here in California. So maybe adding like some dark stormy clouds would be appropriate. You can also use it to change it to the night when it's during the day or vice versa. And just really let your imagination go wild to create whatever new fantastical worlds you want. Another capability is that you can now pin 3D objects to the sky. So you have this Niantic airship here, which is pinned. This example doesn't really show it being included by the foreground, but if you have any mountains or buildings or what else is in the foreground, bridges like this one that are in front of this object, you'll actually see it being occluded by that foreground. So it'll be behind the mountain or behind the buildings, which creates this really cool sense of depth, which hasn't really been possible to create in Aethel experiences before. And this really just allows you to use the sky as a canvas to place whatever 3D content, create whatever 3D scene you want, all in the sky. And lastly, this isn't a sky experience per se, but we call this like the giant background experience, where a character is technically standing on the ground, but just really far away. And because we have the same occlusion principle, when Dodie here walks behind a building or a mountain, they'll be occluded by that building or mountain. And it creates this really cool sense of, wow, this giant, Dodie or Shrek or whatever other character you want is, while they're standing on the ground really far away, and they're massive, they're huge. And so it lets users, your users, interact with these larger than life characters that are far off in the distance. Cool, so those are our main product features. This is some ways that are that we have seen Sky Effects being used already in these past few months. The first showcase is See Santa Fly, which is the experience that Niantic made. Ian and Evan actually worked on that quite a bit. So if you have any other questions about this experience, feel free to ask them. I'm sure they're happy to tell you more about it. But we essentially made this as a holiday experience. This moon here is actually a 2D image on a plane, but it gives us this really cool effect that's like a three-dimensional moon just really far off in the background. And so you can really play with depth and illusions here in the sky, and you don't have to find like a 3D model of a moon. You can just use a flat 2D image or any cool video textures you may have. Next, one of our premier partners, Unbound, made this really cool demo of Sky Effects, where they show off a lot of retro references of characters, and I think there's even like a Star Wars reference in a bit. But yeah, they have a giant character here in the background that's looming over you. And they do this really cool effect here, which I will go over in the tip section, but they fade out the camera feed here so that the transition between sky and not sky is a bit smoother. But yeah, I mean, you could do whatever 3D scene you've already been creating in our SLAM scenes or in our world effects. You could do anything like that just in the sky, and it just adds something more to your project. Cool. So now for the workshop portion, hope everyone has their building hats on. We're going to be doing a live workshop here today, so I'm hoping that everyone can follow along. We've tried to keep it simple. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in Slido or in the chat, and we'll be happy to help you out. So first, some learning objectives. By the end of this workshop, you'll be able to define the key features, functionality, and use cases of SkyFX. We've gone over some of those already. You'll be able to clone a blank SkyFX project, review the code, and customize it, and also test it in a remote environment. So if you're actually not next to the sky, we provide ways for you to test this experience on your computer. And lastly, you can describe some of the best practices when building a SkyFX experience. Just going over the prereqs again, like Chanel mentioned, you do want a Eighthwall account and an available workspace. If not, say in the chat or something, and then we'll try to help you out. But we're just assuming that everyone has an Eighthwall account for this workshop. Also, if you have any custom assets that you want to swap out in this workshop, feel free to have them on hand. I know I have a lot of stuff just scattered in my downloads folder. So maybe if you have something there, you can pull up really fast. For the specific file formats we want, for the texture specifically, a PNG or a JPEG work great. Preferably wider textures like panoramic or equirectangular. These images replace the sky sphere really well. You could have like a seamless texture as well that just repeats across the sky. That could work. But if you just have like a regular smaller image, there's a chance it'll be stretched out on the sky or it'll look not as good. For the 3D model, we highly recommend the GLB file format. It's pretty standard in all of our Eighthwall sample projects that we've made. We recommend 15 to 20 megabytes max. This is really like a really high max here. Honestly, try to keep it like under 10 and like as small as possible just for performance on the web. Smaller assets really help with that. If you don't have any, there's a link I provided here called poly.pizza. It's a really handy resource for finding GLB files. They're mostly all low poly, but I found it to be a great resource. We've also provided some textures and assets for you to use if you don't have any. They're in the Google Drive folder that I think has been shared or has been linked to you. And there you'll find a 2D texture and a 3D model of a plane. And lastly, basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript knowledge. Unfortunately, Eighthwall is not no code. So we do require some sort of coding knowledge, but don't worry, I'll walk you through the lines, what to change. And yeah, if you know A-Frame, that's a huge plus. Checkpoint. How is everyone feeling? Give me a check if everything has made sense so far. Give me an X if not. Okay, seeing lots of checks here. A lot of checks, great. Chanel just posted the asset link and also poly.pizza. A-Frame squad, yes, sir. Hey, Hugo, if you want to put a giant Shrek in there, I'm not stopping you. I think it's a great idea. Okay, cool. I don't see any X's, so I think we're good to go. Great, so we're gonna set up the project now. If everyone can navigate to eighthwall.com/projects, or someone can paste this link in the chat, that'd be fantastic. I'm just gonna navigate there now. This is the Google Drive with the sample assets, but if we can. Okay. So this is our project library. You can also find this on our website if you click project library. And what we want is the A-Frame SkyFX template, not to be confused with the regular A-Frame SkyFX. We're using this template version just because it's a little simpler, a little easier to change out assets. While it looks not as cool, maybe it's a lot easier to build off of. If you don't see it for some reason, feel free to type in the search bar SkyFX template. It should pop up as one of the options. Also, make sure you're not cloning the 3JS one. You're cloning the A-frame one. We're going to be using A-frame today. If you know Three.js, feel free to check it out on your own time. But we're going to click into the project, and you should see a clone button and a launch button. Cool. Checkpoint. Has everyone found the project? Is anyone running into any issues? Give me a check if you have. Chanel has posted the project's link and also the sample project link directly in the chat. Cool. Seeing lots and lots of checks. We're doing pretty good on time as well. Fantastic. All right. So next, we're going to clone this into your workspace or your repo. Workspace is kind of the term we use at Eighth Wall for your repository and your personal project library. It's really simple. Just hit the clone project button, not the launch button, but the clone project button. And I'll show you how to do that right now. Clone. And then you want to select your workspace. If you have more than one, select the one you want the project to be within. I'm going to select my personal workspace. As you're naming this project URL, I recommend you name it something identifiable, not just put like test or like, Sky. I mean, maybe Sky, but maybe name it something specific like name it like create Sky session. I will say this URL can't be changed easily or not at all. So make sure you think about it. You can always like duplicate the project and with a new URL, but that's a bit annoying. So decide on a URL and then put that in. And license type, we can put demo or even non-commercial if you plan to like, I don't know, make it more official, but just as long as it's not commercial, that's okay. And then just hit create. And we should be cloning the project into your workspace within a few seconds. Right. You should see this code IDE pop up. If it is all gray like this, just give your page a quick refresh. Our page likes to get warmed up sometimes. We're all tired in the morning or when we get up first. So same thing. It needs a little refresh for it to be filled up with color. Cool. I believe we have another checkpoint. Yep. All right. So give me some checks if you found that to be okay, if you've cloned your project. X's if not. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of checks. Fantastic. Let's check the chat. Okay, Keith says you only see the Sky image in the Google Drive link.
I'm gonna repost it. I think there's some privacy settings.
Okay, got it. Cool, thanks. So Chanel's gonna take care of that, and that should be updated really soon. Creighton is stuck on the title of his project. Yeah, maybe Ian or Evan can help you out, Creighton. Yeah, we do have some requirements on your URL title. I don't think we allow number starts. Yep. Okay. Cool. Seems most people have checks, so we're gonna continue moving forward. Time to start building. This is actually what the initial project should look like. Don't run out and test it right now. We don't want you all getting distracted, but this is what the blank sky project is. There's a space texture and then this unit cube floating in the middle of your screen. I'm first going to go over some of the core lines of code that allow you to use segmentation, and then we can go into actually swapping out lines of code. So the ones I'll be going over today are XR layers, the sky scene primitive, excuse me, and then the sky recenter component. So XR layers, you'll see, is on line 11. This is a attribute we add to the A scene. If you used Athol before, you're very familiar with this XR blank mental model. This is essentially what allows our engine to know what product feature you want to run. And so if you're using our world effects, you would put XR web. If you're using our face effects, you put XR face. And for sky, since it's part of our segmentation layer suite, we're going to put XR layers here. Without it, SkyFX is not going to work. So this is definitely the most important thing to emphasize. Next, well, how do we actually put things in the sky? Good question. We made this as easy as possible for you all, where we have this sky scene primitive that's essentially a 3D scene that's only available in the sky. And so you sandwich everything you want in the sky to be within the sky scene, and then everything you want to be not in the sky, you sandwich it outside of the sky scene, but still within the A scene. So you can imagine the A scene to be the world effects scene, and then the sky scene to be the sky segmentation scene. You can see in the code here on line 24, we have the A sky, which is putting out that space texture you saw earlier, and then the A box, which is that purple box you see floating in the sky. And then, yes, the third one I want to talk about was the sky recenter component here. This one's pretty important. If you want to see the actual code, you can go into the components folder here on the left and double click on sky recenter. It's a pretty simple component. It just calls recenter. Recenters the 3D scene once we see that sky has been detected. And we do this by listening to the sky coaching overlay event, which I will go over in the future a little bit. But for the time being, the point is that this will recenter your sky scene the first time that sky has been detected. And we found this to be very useful because what if your user opens up the phone, opens up the SkyFX experience when they're facing behind them, and then they're like, oh, I have to look at the sky. So they turn around, they put their phone up, and they don't see anything, or they don't see the focal point of your scene because we set the orientation of the scene based on initialization. And so it'd actually be behind the user because they started the scene facing backwards. And we found this to be pretty common because, you know, people usually aren't looking at the sky when they open up a URL or scan a QR code. And so by calling recenter as soon as we detect sky, it automatically makes the focus of your scene seen right away when the user detects sky. So those are our core features. Next, I'm going to go into some of our other components that maybe you can still run Sky without them, but some very useful features nonetheless. It is the Sky coaching overlay, the invert layer mask attribute, and also the Sky remote authoring component. The Sky coaching overlay is similar to our VPS coaching overlay, our absolute scale coaching overlay, if you've seen them. Basically a UI animation on the screen that helps users navigate towards the sky. It kind of shows a person pointing their phone up towards the sky. Really helpful to direct your users on what to do. And I mentioned earlier about these events. It will fire 2 events, the sky coaching overlay.hide and sky coaching overlay.show, essentially just firing when we detect sky and then when we lose the sky. And this can be really helpful if you want your own custom coaching overlays. I know some of our partners have added their own with their own branding, their own style, and you would listen to these events instead of using the one that we provide for you. But really helpful UX-wise, just because people don't usually, like you have to instruct your users on how to play with the AR experience for sure. And in order to use it, there's an extra step. You not only have to add sky coaching overlay as a attribute in your Ace scene, you also have to add, you have to load the package in head.html with this meta line that I've also pasted in the slides here. Great. Next, the invert layer mask attribute. And this doesn't go on your Ace scene, but goes on your sky scene primitive. Right now it's set to false, but if you set it to true, it actually flips the segmentation that we detect to everything that's not sky. And so your sky scene will show up in everything that's not sky. This can be like a tricky concept to imagine, but as you're testing and working on the sky challenge, feel free to flip that to true, and then I think you'll see what I'm talking about. And like the space texture will appear like on the mountain, on the building. It's honestly kind of cool. Reminds me of like, forgot the specific term, but like double exposure in photography, when when you overlay one photo on another, it kind of gives this like cool texturing effect. Yes, okay. And then last, we have the Sky Remote authoring, which is what I was talking about, to let you develop Sky experiences from your desktop instead of having to walk outdoors all the time. We're going to actually be using this in our next portion, but it's a really handy tool. We just add Sky Remote authoring at the bottom here on your Ace scene, and then that should enable it. If you want to peek at the code, we have the code here. It's a little more complicated, but we'll go into this a bit later. So I'm going to remove this for now. Ooh, okay, well, I know that was a lot of information, so time for another checkpoint. Give me some checks if that made sense to you, X's if it didn't. Feel free to post in the chat if you have questions. How are you all doing? Cool, thumbs up from Hugo, fantastic. A lot of checks, Great, great, great. Glad everyone's keeping up. Mahir asks a good question. Why is it called XR layers and not XR sky? We're hoping to launch this as a segmentation suite in the future. Not sure what other segmentation layers we'll add, but we're calling it layers just to include these other segmentation layers in the future, and not have to put like XR sky, XR ground, XR, I don't know, water, and just having to enable XR layers will make it really easy for you to use in the future. Thanks, Chanel. Yes, we'll be using remote authoring for sure later. Yes, people, that's a very highly requested segmentation layer, and we're taking note of that already. I think, did I see an X? Maybe it disappeared. Okay, cool. I think we're good. All right, so thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for your patience. I know that was a lot of information, a lot of talking, but this is the fun part now where we get to customize the project. It's up to you on how you want to customize it. I'm going to show you how to replace the sky texture and also replace the sky asset. Oh, don't want to click. And if you're ever lost, I think you have access to these slides, or maybe we'll share them afterwards. But the lines you want to focus on are line 24 and line 26. So first I'm going to show you how to switch out the sky texture. If you haven't used the Ace Sky before, it's this really handy primitive that creates a semicircle sphere dome on top of your scene. And then you can map whatever texture on the inside of that dome to create like a skybox, essentially, in A-frame. And you texture it by setting the source property of the material attribute to the ID of your texture. So right now we have this space texture PNG here that we're using, and we're texturing it with the sky texture. we load it through the A assets, and then we call it using its ID. So I'm going to go to our sample assets here. We're going to download the other space texture. I don't know what you call this, nebula-esque. I kind of like these colors though. It's like warm. So now that I have my space texture, it's really easy to upload. Just grab it from your downloads folder or wherever your file is and drag and drop into our cloud editor on this left-hand sidebar here. And you'll see it appear right here. To make the file path easier, you can always drag it into the textures folder if you want. And I recommend renaming it to something a bit simpler. This is a pretty long string, so I'm going to call this warm space. Feel free to name yours whatever you want, but I'm going to name this warm space.png. Once you have done that, go to line 14. You can either change the file path of the original texture we loaded, or you can create a new one. I'm just going to rename it for sake of simplicity. So instead of pathing to space.png here, we're going to path it to warm space.png. And since the ID is already hooked up to the skybox, when I save and build, it should show up as the regular sky. Before we show you that though, I also want to show how to switch out this asset here. So I'm going to go here. I provided this airplane GLB. We can preview it in the cloud editor if you want. We're going to upload it. You double click, there's this wonderful airplane. It is in the ground though. I should have moved it up, but that's okay. It's in the sky anyways. You can't tell that it's like in the ground. If this was a World Effects workshop, this would be different, but it's a Sky Effects one. So yeah. So how you're going to load this in is a little more complex. Since we're just using a Brox primitive here, we can't just replace the file path like we did with the space texture. We're going to actually have to load a new the asset here. And I've provided a line of code here where you take the you create a new A asset item, set the path to your model, and then set an ID for your model so that you can reference it in your scene. So I'm just gonna type that. It's called A asset item. And then we're gonna give it an ID like plane, and then source, we can set it to assets/airplane.glb. I'm going to rename it to airplane instead of airplane_1 to make it a little simpler. Great. And now this should be loaded in our scene and we can reference it. So you can either comment out this box, you can delete the box. You can even like rename this A entity. A lot of ways to get rid of this box. I'm just going to comment it out. And we're going to create an A entity instead. This is how you load GLTF or GLB models in A-Frame. We're going to set the GLTF model attribute to your ID. So in my case, I named it plane. And I can just kind of copy over the position that the box had, scale. We can set it to 111 to start. And yeah, that should be it. And now the part you've been waiting for, since I'm in a conference room, I don't have a sky around me. Oh no, what do I do? How do I see it? Well, we have the Sky Remote authoring component. So I'm just going to add the Sky Remote authoring component here. We're going to hit save and build. And fingers crossed, live demo. Hope nothing goes wrong. But if something does, that's fine. We can always fix it. We're going to hit preview. And this only works on desktop. So we're going to, instead of scanning this, you can open a new tab using the link here. And voila. Fantastic. Okay, so we've made some like fake foreground here to simulate the sky in this virtual environment. We've tried to get a varying degrees of height with these buildings and mountains. This is a really cool way to compose your scene. So we have this plane model here. We have this warm space texture. Maybe it's not like wide enough, so you see this wrapping here. But yeah, this is how it works. We swapped out the texture, we swapped out the model, and we used the Sky Remote authoring component. And I believe we have a checkpoint. Yes. Okay. So I know that was like a bit of hands-on stuff. So please let me know if that made sense, if you're able to swap out your texture or your model. If you run into any issues, give me some checks or some X's. Or keep working. Don't interrupt your flow to put a check, but whenever you have time. Okay, so we have some X's. So you might be working, you might be figuring stuff out. Feel free to ask any question in the chat if you want me to go over anything. We'll just go back to this slide so you have it for reference. Yep, Hugo. I guess either this slide or here. I'll go back to the actual code so you can have it to reference. This might help. Oh, sorry if I went a bit too fast. We're just trying to get through all the information here, but our support engineers are very skilled. So feel free to ask them any questions if you miss something. Cool. Well, before we move on, I think I'm just gonna review everything again. We're gonna go from the start. So what we did is we uploaded a warm space texture to our asset library shown here. We moved it into the texture folder. Once we did that, we went on line 15 and renamed the file path from space PNG to warm space.png, or whatever you called your file name. And doing that should automatically replace the A-Sky material and change out the texture. Afterwards, we downloaded the airplane GLB. We uploaded the GLB file to the asset library, renamed it to airplane.glb. We then created a new asset item with the ID plane and called it the airplane.glb. I see someone raise their hand.
I got a little question.
Yeah.
The way that I through the A entity tag, I upload an Snorlax model, and in the A asset item, I put the Snorlax ID. So in the A entity tag, I use the GLTF model and put that ID, the Snorlax. Is that the way to do it? Because I received this error that it cannot find the module Snorlax.
If you can't find your model, you want to make sure your source path is correct. I know you always have to do /assets because everything is within our assets.
Yeah, assets, models. Well, I create a folder named models, and inside that folder, I upload my Snorlax GLB. Yeah, I think so. And I put in the ID attribute Snorlax.
Yep.
In double quote, and in the A entity GLT model, I use that ID Snorlax to try to get that item.
Yep, and then you have the hashtag as well, I assume.
What hashtag? No, I don't.
There we go. There we go. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Bruno. This is actually a good transition into what we did next, where we created the A entity primitive. We set the GLTF model attribute to your model ID here. Make sure you have the hashtag or else it can't reference the ID. We copy pasted the position over from the A box, or you can type it out yourself. And we set the scale to the original scale, which is just 111 by default. And then we added Sky Remote authoring under the A scene here in order to see it remotely.
And Josh, real quickly, if you can zoom in on the code editor, I think that would be helpful.
Oh, my bad.
Just like one zoom in, I think would be.
Yeah. This looks good.
Yep, that's great.
Okay, cool. Eli asked a question that this attribute is called GLTF model. I believe it works for GLBs and GLTFs. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Ian or Evan, but it's just the name of the attribute. Cool. So if you're still stuck or still working on something, feel free to reach out to Ian or Evan or post in the chat and they'll be happy to help you out. But we're going to move on for the sake of time. Testing. So beyond the Sky Remote authoring component, if you actually want to use your phone and test it, you can find a stock photo of a sky with some foreground in it. We found having this foreground is important. If you just have it be sky, it's hard to detect that it's like all sky. We've also provided this asset in the Google Drive as well to test out. And make sure to disable the Sky Remote authoring component either by adding a letter to it or like deleting it entirely before you try to test it out on your phone. I just went over remote authoring, but another powerful feature of remote authoring is that you can use it as a visual editor of sorts. And so this is just explaining how to use it. This is a great reference slide made by Evan. It is important to add the tag below XR layers. I just add it at the bottom of all of my attributes. If you add it above, something might go wrong. But we're gonna add it here. We're gonna go back to the scene. And you can use the A-frame inspector, which on Mac, I think is Control-Option-I. Yeah, Control-Option-I. Control-Alt-I on Windows, I believe. And this gives you the ability to click on your assets and to drag and drop them in this visual GUI way, which is really handy for scene composition as well. You just have to remember to look at the position here that you're changing and then copying that over into your code because this doesn't edit your code. Great, so that's Sky Remote authoring. Another checkpoint. It's mostly information we've covered, but give me a check if you're still following along. Sweet, seems like everyone has stuff working. All right, final stretch here. Yeah, so no matter what you've made, if you've just made using the template project or use your own texture, use your own GLB, please upload them right now to the drive. If you go out of the sample assets folder, you can actually go to the developer sample projects. We already have some submissions, but just upload a video, maybe a screenshot if there's no time to take a video. It can even be in the remote authoring view. Don't be shy. This stuff, we won't like make this like super public or anything. So just whatever work in progress you have, just for everyone to see what everybody's working on. I think it's really fun to inspire creativity that way. Okay, I'm just gotta open some breakout rooms. Cool. Chanel just uploaded the Google Drive. No worries, Creighton. You can always upload your stuff later, but please upload it. And yes, you'll have access to the slides after. Cool, another checkpoint, but I think people are just working on their experiences and uploading them. And as you're working, feel free to continue working and just to listen. This is mostly a audio thing. There's not too much visuals. I'm just give you some best practices and additional tips I found to be super helpful as I've been developing SkyFX experiences. You'll notice that the transition between sky and not sky in the remote authoring was pretty harsh. The warm space texture really ends pretty abruptly. And so you can either use a camera shader on the regular camera feed to make it darker, like our partner Unbound did in their retro experience shown at the beginning of this workshop. Or an easier way to do it is to take your photo into Photoshop and to add a opacity gradient to it at the bottom. So essentially adding your own feathering. You can see on the default space texture here, we feathered out, 60%, 65% of the original photo. But this really adds a nice transitory effect between the real sky and your virtual sky. And this is really important just because we don't want to break the illusion of AR for people. And it's sort of like real-time magic in a way. And that's part of why we love AR so much as well. Another tip is to include a focal point in your experiences. It can be really exciting to have this huge canvas to work with. And you might want to add like all these textures, all these models, all in this 360-degree view around you. But without one, you can really easily imagine how your user will look up, they'll look around. And because there's stuff to focus on everywhere, they can't focus on one thing. And this can be very overwhelming. So make sure you have some sort of focal point, some sort of leading lines where your models are flying around maybe, but just make sure not to overwhelm your users. Another tip that's not written here that I thought of was that you should really consider what SkyFX brings to your AR experiences. For me, it's really the sense of depth that we've never been able to have before. Before, if you just use world effects or face effects, everything was over the foreground. And so even if you wanted to fake a plane flying, as soon as that plane flies in front of a building or a tree, it'll seem really, really tiny because it's not flying behind the building. So it'll seem like this really small toy plane that's flying in front of the tree. But now with SkyFX, you can actually make it fly behind the tree, behind the building. And this really creates this amazing, fantastic sense of depth that just adds to the immersion and the interlacing of virtual content with the physical world. And that's all what we all want to do, right? We want to bridge the physical with the virtual. Cool. So if you're ready to keep listening, I'm just going over the learning summary. These are our learning objectives that I went over. So you should be able to define the key features, functionality, and use cases of SkyFX. We kind of went over how to clone a blank SkyFX project, how to review the code, how to customize it, and also how to test it with Sky Remote Authoring. And lastly, describe the best practices when building a SkyFX experiences. And I'm sure there's so many more practices that you will discover that I haven't been able to discover yet. But more than happy to hear those best practices, and we'll definitely appreciate it if you could bring up these points in our dev Slack. Next steps. So what do you want to do after this? What do you want to do for the SkyFX challenge? And like how will you win the SkyFX challenge? I think that's the better question. Everyone wants a Quest Pro. Well, the sky's not the limit. Haha. So what more you can do with Sky, there's so much you can do. If you're good at coding shaders, or you have found really nice A-frame or Three.js shaders, you can replace the sky with not just a texture, but with actually a shader. This will be more performant and also might even achieve the effects you want without having to find a texture for it. People have also replaced the segmentation edge with like clouds or auroras to make that transition smoother as well, to kind of create this like dreamlike window in the sky, essentially. Like I said before, whatever you do in a world effects scene, you could also do in a sky effects scene. We've had many people build out games in world effects. You could take those games into the sky, add interactivity, add animations, add characters. That's just a lot of code on top of sky effects. You can create an inverted experience. I haven't seen too many examples of this yet, but I imagine you could do something really cool by texturing everything that's not sky. I can't think of like a good narrative off the top of my head right now, but I think it's just something really interesting to explore and can really inspire creativity. And lastly, we've seen people create sky experiences with like cardinal compass directions. So you can map like GPS north, south, west, east data with sky effects to map a real world like stars or planets or anything related to astronomy in the sky. And that's just a really cool idea to use AR to show people like where constellations are, where where the moon, how the moon phases are going to be, all of these experiences related to the real world. I see we have some chat messages. Is it recommended to use Unity or Blender? Just asking why. This is an interesting question. I think we usually model everything and configure the assets in Blender just because it's a more focused tool for 3D assets. Unity, I guess you can like model in Unity. It's just not as not as good of a user experience, maybe. I will say whatever shaders or particle systems or physics you do in Unity can't be carried over to the web very easily. I'd rather you just model the assets and then use A-Frame's particle system and A-Frame physics to do that. I just want to save you some work that way. Yeah, Hugo's answer is great. Unity is a completely different development environment. Blender is a 3D modeling software. They're not too interchangeable for sure. Sweet. Seems like everyone is uploading their experiences. Hankax, is there a way to add the transparent gradient to a video or animate sky? Of course. I think if you bring into like Premiere Pro, or even like After Effects, maybe you could definitely add a opacity gradient to your video. And that'd be a really cool thing to do. Just reading through some more of these. I'm excited to see what Hugo uploaded. Can we see your code again? Yep, we'll share it all in the Slack. No problem, Creighton. Okay, cool. So we're just about wrapping up, but I do want to show off the Google Drive. Hopefully people have had time to show off some things. So I'm just going to refresh. Nice. Okay, so we have Shrek in the sky. Oh, I love this model. This is hilarious. I can imagine if you like rig this in like Mixamo or something and like have the Shrek be dancing, or this is such a great model. I'd love to hear where you found it. See what Joel made here. He has a video. Oh wow. The pink moon. There's the starry effects. This is really cool. Oh wow, it's even rotating. Dang, it seems like you've done quite a bit of work already. I see you have like a change your sky button, some sort of metadata coming out from here. Cool. See another video. See what Chanel was able to make. This giant creature coming out of the sky. It's even walking. That's pretty cool. Ooh, this Mars texture as well. And then see what Nathan made. Cat in the sky. Not Puss in Boots, Puss in Sky. Okay, cool. So we're just about wrapping up time here. Here are just some really useful resources for you to use. Evan made this fantastic best practices deck that really goes into what I've talked about and more. It's really detailed, really wonderful. So make sure to check it out. I believe the link is in the Slack. I'm sure Chanel can post it somewhere again. But this kind of covers everything I've talked about today. And yeah, I think that's all my time. I might have gone over a little bit. Apologies, Chanel. But yeah, feel free to ask any question in Slido, and I'll be happy to stay on for a bit and answer them.